Hey everyone, and Krzysztof the Polish Geek says Happy New Year and welcome to the first movie review of 2024. But first, New Year and Christmas were great and I celebrated it with my family. My sister and her kids already went back to Paris and my parents left too, so I'm alone again and time for my first movie review of 2024. And this is a review of a Polish movie, Akademia Pana Kleksa, which in English would translate to Academy of Mr. Kleks, although I looked up and apparently the book was actually translated into English and where it's called Academy of Mr. Inkblot or something like that, because the movie is actually based on a classic Polish children's book, Akademia Pana Kleksa, Academy of Mr. Kleks, which every kid reads in elementary school, and I read it too, and I remember how much I loved this book. It was written by a famous Polish poet and writer, Jan Brzechwa, who's actually one of the most popular children's writers in Poland. And so, every kid has read this book in elementary school, and the story is about a wizard academy. Yeah, probably sounds like similar to Harry Potter, but trust me, there are a lot of differences. But yeah, it's about this academy, about this wizard academy run by Mr. Kleks in a fairy tale land, and the main character is this boy, Adam Niezgudka, who goes to this academy, and the academy is all boy, and all boys' names start on A. And this movie, actually there was a different movie about it in 1983, which was actually a pretty good movie, low budget, but pretty good one. And this movie is clearly very much a modern take on the story. And because it's a modern take, there are plenty of differences. Some I liked, some not so much. We'll get to it later. For example, one of the major differences is that, actually the very first difference is that Adam is changed to a girl, and it's now Eda Niezgudka, which although I'm not too fond of gender race swaps, if you probably watch my channel you know by then, but considering the quantity of changes that already have been made anyway in this story, I was able to roll with the flow. Especially that another change they made is that they moved Poland to New York City, because Ada Niezgudka now lives in New York City, while Adam originally in the book lived in Poland. And that's also I didn't mind, because I felt like that the reason they moved the action from Poland to New York City is probably to make the story more international. And also now all the kids that attend the Magical Academy are no longer just Polish kids. There are kids from all over the world. There was a girl from Japan, a boy from Brazil, a boy from Mexico, and in general kids from all over the world. And that's another change I don't mind, considering that this movie clearly is intended to be made for international audiences. So I think the change made perfect sense, basically, to make this, especially that this is also in a Magical Academy in a fairy tale land. It makes perfect sense now that it's international and not just accepts Polish kids. So that's another change I didn't mind, although that's also where we're starting to get to some of the things I didn't like. Let's talk about how the actual movie was, because now I talked about the differences, and as I said, I didn't actually mind the differences all so much, because I think that Academy of Mr. Kleks is a perfect example of a story that very much can have a modern upgrade. So I think the modern upgrade didn't bother me at all. As I said, I didn't mind moving the action to New York City. I mean the real world to New York City, because it was still fairy tale land technically where the academy was located, and making kids international from all over the world. That's the change I didn't mind one bit. I think it makes sense in a modern world. As for changing Adam to Ada, that's the difference that I just was like, roll with the flow, because it's no big deal in a grand scheme of things with all the changes they made. But let's talk about the actual movie. And first, some of the positives. I think the visuals in this movie looked pretty good. They're not particularly groundbreaking, and it's obvious that they're kind of borrowing from other movies with colorful visuals, but I overall did like the colorful visuals. They were certainly not the best in the world, and as I said, it's obvious they're kind of derivative of other movies with beautiful colorful visuals, but I ultimately thought they were still pretty good to look at. And another thing I liked, I think Tomasz Kot, a Polish actor who played Mr. Kleks, I think he did a phenomenal job, and I think he was a wonderful pick to play Mr. Kleks. I still think the guy who played him in the 1983 movie was better, but oh well, this Thomas Scott still did a very good job as Mr. Kleks, and he's certainly a very good modern Kleks. And I do think Adanis Gutka was actually a well done character, yeah. As I said, some people probably hate, understandably, that they changed Adam to Ada, but at the end of the day, as I said, considering the many changes that they already made, I said I didn't mind it all that much, and she was a pretty likable character anyway, so that's good. But here are my overall problems with the movie, because now if I'm being honest, I don't think the movie was particularly good. It's like there are plenty of great ideas, but ultimately they're all wasted and they go nowhere. So what I say about the movie, I think it was a very wasted potential, and I'll give an example. Like, the perfect change I thought was actually pretty good and interesting and works perfectly on a modern take is that I liked how they decided to make the school more international and have kids from all over the world. As I said, the girl from Japan and a boy from Brazil, but there was also a girl from Ukraine. And I think that's, as I've already been saying, I don't think that was a bad change. It was actually a good change, I think. But those kids are not even characters. They like just appear at the beginning and then they are just nothing more than like basically even less than plot device. They're just like they're in the background, but they basically have almost no effect on the story, because if you contrast this movie with what the original book did, like all the boys in the book, they all had their own characteristics, and you could totally tell their characteristics, and they were all their characters on their own. But here, all those international kids, they're practically not characters at all. It's like they all don't have any characterization. There is nothing I remember about them. And that's one of my major flaws of the movie. Like, if they wanted to make the Academy international, they could use that idea and make it interesting. Like, give every kid some interesting characteristic, like focus more on them, give a lot more about their backstory. But nope. Like, as I said, they made the Academy international, which sounds like a good idea on paper, but ultimately that goes nowhere. And if all those kids were Polish, the story wouldn't change one bit. Nothing would probably change. And now we're coming to the second interesting idea that also goes nowhere. Like, just like in the book, lots of fairy tale characters show up in this story. Of course, because again, it's a modern take, we see a lot more fairy tale characters that we haven't seen in the original book. For example, we see Daedalus and Icarus show up from Greek mythology. I actually don't remember if they showed up in the book, but they did make a cameo here, which was a pretty cool cameo, but I was hoping for more. And also we see the little match girl from the Hans Christian Andersen short story, very sad one. She actually did make a cameo in the original book too, so that's kind of, although it was a different cameo in different context, but that's what happened both here in the book. But also there were characters who most certainly did not appear in the original book, especially that in the end lots of fairy tale characters come up, and it's obviously very much Disney characters. Lots of characters from the Disney's animated classics showed up too, something that most certainly did not happen in the original book by Jan Brzechwa. And well, as I said, I totally understand they wanted to make the story more modern, so hence why they included so many characters from stories that certainly children nowadays are very familiar with. Ultimately, I think that's very much another wasted potential, because none of those characters particularly get much characterization, and they're barely characters too, just like most of the kids from the school. And I partially understand that probably it was due to copyright reasons they couldn't really do much with the Disney characters, but maybe they should just simply use the characters from the original fairy tales, which are in the public domain, or whatever. Maybe just use characters that they could use, because I really wanted to know more about the whole fairy tale characters and all, and children interacting with them. I really think that, and now that I think of it, because they made the Academy International here, they could maybe also use some fairy tale characters from folk tales from all over the world, like the Japanese ones, for example, Ukrainian ones. Yeah, like if they made the Academy more international, maybe they could use more characters from tales from all over the world. But oh well, that's another unused potential. And the final thing I want to talk about, and that's something that's another major difference between the book and the movie, is that there is also this prince turned into a bird, Mateusz, who tells Adam Niezgudka in the book and Ada in the movie his backstory, how he killed a king of the wolves, and the wolves decided to take vengeance, and as a result they slaughtered all his royal family, and he was the only survivor, and then he turned into a bird to hide himself. And in the book there was only the backstory, and for the most part it doesn't really come back until later, somewhat I guess, while in the movie it basically became a major plot point because the wolves then invade the academy, and basically they invade all the fairy tales, and then they invade the academy itself, and Ada has to save the academy. And the way she saves it is through empathy. And while I didn't think it was a bad idea, I overall liked the message about empathy, and I thought that was pretty good message, and I'm happy that instead of some like epic battle, don't get me wrong, I adore epic battles, don't get me wrong, I'm a biggest fan of epic battles, but I don't think it would quite fit well in this movie. That's why I'm glad they chose not to go for a final battle, and instead they just chose to go for a power of empathy. But at the same time, if I'm being honest, the wolves is not really the story I'm particularly interested in the first place. I very much preferred how it was originally in the book, how the wolves mostly just served for the backstory, but I don't think there was particular need for them in the main story. Like, I went for the movie mostly to see the academy, the magic in the academy, the fairy tale characters, and also, as I've been saying, they made this story more modern and had lots of international students from all over the world, and yeah, that's another stuff I was very much interested in, and also maybe the fact that Ada was from New York instead of somewhere in Poland is another thing that I really found interesting and was very much cool for a potential idea. Ultimately, what I'm saying about Akademia Pana Kleksa, Academy of Mr. Kleks, is that the movie has beautiful visuals and some good performances from some of the actors, and some really good, interesting ideas, but overall it's a very much a wasted potential. Like, the best ideas are very much wasted and not delved on, while the movie chooses mostly to focus on things that if I'm being honest, I can't say I find particularly interesting. Hence why, if I'm being honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie. I'm glad I saw it. And again, I said, there are certainly some really good ideas in the movie, but ultimately I think it's a wasted potential. But because the sequel is already announced, who knows, maybe the sequel will delve into those far more interesting ideas that the first movie somewhat presented, but as of now, there was potential, but overall wasn't a huge fan of the movie. So, okay guys, so here is my very first review of 2024, and press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later, bye!